Greetings, brothers and friends, and the audience that are joining us today. We are excited to be here for a special General Convention Fireside chat that will be addressing the state of financial wellness within the African American community, featuring our General Treasurer, Brother Denzel Fleming, as well as special guest, Brother Brian Lamb, Global Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at JPMorgan Chase & Co. Again, my name is Gerald Johnson II. I serve as the Chief Development Officer for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated at our general offices in Baltimore, Maryland. At this time, I would love for everyone that's watching in the audience, as we usually do, to please use the chat at this moment to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, what state, what occupation are you in, or if you're in the financial world, please let us know which sector that is. We'd love to hear from you. And as well as we continue through tonight's special fireside chat, please feel free to use that chat to include questions for our speakers, as they'll be sure to have the question and answers at the end of the event. So we are so excited to bring this special webinar that will discuss not only diversity and inclusion initiatives at JPMorgan Chase, but it will also potentially talk about some opportunities that will be soon available to our brothers. So let's get things kicked off. So first, I would like to introduce Brother Denzel Fleming. Brother Denzel Fleming, excuse me. I remember he told me yesterday, don't say Denzel unless there's money involved or something like that. So Brother Fleming, thank you for joining us this evening.
My pleasure, Gerald. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, and I want to give brothers a quick background on who Brother Denzel Fleming is, in case those may have forgotten. With over 20 years in the private industry and corporate America, specifically in small business and commercial banking, global wealth and investments, and financial management, Brother Fleming serves as our General Treasurer of our beloved Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Credentialed with a master's degree in agricultural business and economics, a Six Sigma Green Belt certification, and as a certified financial planner, he has climbed the corporate ladder that eventually led him to be a senior vice president at Bank of America, a position he has held for over 15 years. Throughout his career and voluntary experiences, Brother Fleming has acquired a broad knowledge base essential to understanding the importance of effective controls that ensures sound fiscal and fiduciary management of policies, procedures, and practices. He is a family man with 3 children. Brother Fleming is also married and currently resides in North Carolina. Brother Fleming, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this special event.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Brother Johnson.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now next, I would love to introduce our special guest representing our partners at JPMorgan Chase, Brother Brian Lamb. How are you today, good Brother Brian Lamb?
Brother Johnson, good to see you. Thank you for the chance to be here. I'm excited to be here and visit with the group, so thank you.
Absolutely, Brother Lamb, and we're excited to have you. We're excited to have you, and I'm sure folks have seen you on multiple channels. I know I have as well. Been able to gauge from your intellect, and just to give folks a little background on Brother Lamb, he's the global head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at JPMorgan Chase & Co. And he joined on May 4th, 2020, and reports directly to the co-presidents. He is leading the firm's Path Forward plan, partnering globally to create and drive a holistic strategy and changing the way we incorporate a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable lens into everything that we do. From developing products and services to helping communities, serving clients, and uplifting the employees. Brother Lamb, brings an extensive business experience gained during his 13 years at Fifth Third Bank, including roles leading wealth and asset management and business within middle market and business banking. And in prior roles, he was responsible for the comprehensive strategic framework of the bank's civic commitments. Brother Lamb currently lives in Ohio with his wife and also with 3 children. Brother Lamb, it is a pleasure to have you with us this evening.
It's great to be here.
Fantastic. And so now is the part that we're all been waiting for. We're going to bring up our 2 very special guests on the call today. And really, I would love to open up tonight's fireside chat with some opening remarks. And Brother Lamb, I'll begin with you. And as the name says of our fireside chat tonight, I would love your thoughts on the state of financial wellness within the African American community.
It's no surprise to any of us how challenging the last 18 to 24 months have been in the Black community, whether it's the significant loss small businesses and entrepreneurs that we experienced and witnessed firsthand in the first and second quarter of last year and continue to feel those headwinds for Black businesses, or it's the home ownership gap. I mean, it's really important that we get our arms around the facts that the home ownership rates right now in the Black community, the gap between Black home ownership and home ownership in the white community, that gap is wider than it was when it was basically illegal to discriminate on home ownership in the Black community in the 1960s. As much that has gone on and gone into trying to close that gap, we haven't made the progress that we should have. But that being said, there's also a lot of tailwinds behind us. There's significant leadership in the Black community, including many of our brothers in Alpha Phi Alpha, that are sending a message and making a statement and making a difference to charge a path forward. I think you'll also see that I'm encouraged by some of the momentum of some of our young Black talent, particularly our young Black males that are advancing their careers in education, whether it be in HBCUs or in predominantly white institutions. We are continuing to see momentum around that, and that's going to make a difference for generations to come. But we've got work to do, and there are some very important things we can do to invest today to make a difference for tomorrow. And I think we can talk a little bit about the headwinds and tailwinds that are impacting the Black community today.
Thank you so much, Brother Lamb, for opening us up for that and really providing us some perspective and really laying the groundwork of our conversation today and why this conversation is so impactful now. And Brother Fleming, I love to pose the same question to you and kind of get your thoughts on where we are as far as the African-American community and the state of financial wellness.
Great. Thank you, Brother Johnson. And Brother Lamb, I'm so glad that we're able to engage at this level that certainly goes beyond our fraternity, but also goes directly to the community, where when we talk about the state of, the community in terms of, the community that we actually serve and how do we actually make impact. Financial wellness itself is goes beyond just the financial aspect of it. Obviously, it's about our overall economics. And in this case, we're talking about everything that pales against us, what we live in terms of the symptoms, particularly now as we're coming out, as we're going through. I don't necessarily believe that we're coming out, but that we've gone through with the pandemic, for an example. We are seeing specific symptoms of things that we already know and we've known for some time. A lot of the statistics, Brother Lamb, that you have mentioned have been very systemic. And you can argue whether or not they're intentional or not, but they're pretty systemic for some time now. And I think that we are experiencing the vulnerabilities of what happens when you don't make the right investments for a period of time into certain communities. And what we're talking about today is that how do we build and become well as a community by focusing on things that really will drive impact long term. And so we are not well as a community, and we know that because we know that in examples of now where you can go through a pandemic of any kind, and you see more of people of color businesses that are closing doors much sooner than others. We know when there are health disparities also that's plaguing our communities for a longer time. And it doesn't take much for a pandemic to come through that throws us over into a much deeper panic, if you will. And so all of these are things that really hurt us when we're trying to grow the community. But there is a way to circumvent all of that. And I think having the discussion today perhaps will bring out some of the things that can bring to light some of the root causes by way of education and by way of literacy and acumen that we can really focus on that helps in a long-term fashion really to be able to solve a lot of those complex problems that we find ourselves in.
Brother Fleming, thank you so much. And I think I want to, Brother Lamb, did you want to follow up on that there?
I think Fleming is spot on. And as we have our discussion, I hope that we are able to come up with ideas that not only our own respective companies and ourselves can champion, but we can inspire our brothers and kind of shed some light on what role they can play to lean in and move us forward.
Thank you for that, and I'll follow up with you, Brother Lamb, if you may, and with our first question, really get our conversation going tonight when we talk about these special initiatives and programs and opportunities. Can you tell us a little more about your role in the function of the diversity and inclusion initiatives that you lead, and how did this initiative come to be at JPMorgan Chase?
Absolutely. So, JPMorgan Chase, we have approximately 260,000 employees around the world. We're the largest financial institution in the United States, and frankly have a responsibility to lead the way and model the way. And we know we've got more work to do. As I moved into my role, where I'm responsible for the strategy, the framework, a lot of the things that you hear about with regards to our racial equity commitment, I'll tell you a couple of things to kind of ground you. Number one, I think about the work that we need to do needs to be informed by data. And so I spend a lot of time making sure that we understand where the challenges are and the job to be done, and that they're business led. In order to drive real sustainable change, it can't necessarily just be philanthropy. That's a great companion solution to amplify the work that the businesses can make a difference in, whether it's home ownership and affordable housing. If you think about small business, one of the commitments that we've made that we're leaning in on is how do we make sure that we are spending money, engaging with small businesses so that we can spend our money with them over and above what we've done historically. That's a big component of our racial equity commitment. The other thing that's important is there's this idea of an inside out philosophy, which means we have to make sure inside our own company that we're creating equitable opportunities for our own employees, our own colleagues, before we're prepared to go out and really make a difference with clients and communities. So there's a lot of work centered around creating upward mobility for Black talent, upskilling Black talent. Like, what are we doing to prepare them for jobs of the future? And then there's the talent pipeline, right? So are we reaching down into our HBCUs and our predominantly white institutions to cultivate Black talent, particularly Black men where we can, to create pathways for them to enter the workforce? And it's not just about JPMorgan Chase. We have to make sure that we're creating pathways so that students can build careers in multiple industries. And we try to shed a light and provide insight on what income levels they can earn with certain degrees. What are certain pathways around certifications? Even if you choose not to go to college and get an undergraduate degree, there are still tremendous ways to go out and earn a great quality of life and be productive in society. The other thing that we think about in my role is we're always looking at opportunities to create second chances, re-entry into the workforce for those that potentially have been incarcerated. We know that is a challenge and a headwind, particularly for Black males, but we have a responsibility to find ways to create opportunities for them to be gainfully employed. And that second chance strategy isn't just about diversity. That's much more about equitable opportunity. And how are we thinking about that? Creating pathways and training and curriculum, partnerships with organizations in key markets where we ultimately can get people back to work. And that's a long-term strategy that I think lifts all boats in our society, because we know there's a shortage of labor long-term, and we've got to find creative ways to address that. And then maybe the other thing last thing I'll share around kind of my role and how I think about it is I'm challenging and holding our businesses and our most senior level leaders accountable. So if you think about their performance and their compensation and the goals that they have to drive businesses forward, we've included into their evaluations diversity, equity, and inclusion with clear metrics, measurable metrics, and transparency that ultimately ladders into holding our senior leaders accountable to driving progress, sequential progress every year around our commitments. And I believe when you've got teeth in something, when there's something where people are going to be held accountable, you tend to get improvements. You tend to see change. And that's something different that we're trying to do as a firm.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brother Lamb. And to kind of jump to that last point, and Brother Fleming, please feel free to jump in as well. I love the how you're working directly with your leaders, with the leadership, looking to incorporate those elements of the assessment so intentionally and so directly. Has there been anything that has surprised you about that process, Brother Lamb?
I think the observations that I have are a couple of things. Number one, most companies are really manager dependent, right? So think about that. We've got 35 to 40,000 managers. So as we build strategies at the top of the house and have a tone from the top, what you will find, what you will hear from Black women and men is their managers that are deeper in the organization can really influence and impact their experience and their careers. So you have to be creative and you have to really be thoughtful around how you just strive for manager excellence with clear objectives for those managers, clear expectations, and you're tracking the attributes of what managers are doing to create that right experience. And here's what I tell you, the managers that perform the best are those that typically have some cultural competence. That cultural competence is rooted in an understanding and awareness of how they can interact and communicate with those with different backgrounds and experiences. And so that cultural competence is something that we're constantly solving for, not just with our most senior level leaders, but we're pushing that down into the organization in many ways, and frankly, making sure that the managers that are touching our employees each and every day realize they've got a responsibility to drive outcomes and create pathways for upward mobility and the right experience, which we measure and track. And that shows up in how we reward them.
Absolutely, Brother Lamb. Brother Fleming, I think that Brother Lamb really laid the foundation for our conversation as far as what you all do within your particular roles. And I kind of want to pose that very similar question to you, serving as the General Treasurer of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And I believe that there'll be some great news that'll be coming down the pike this coming weekend concerning your position as General Treasurer. Provide us a little bit more how your day-to-day goes as far as in your role and responsibility within the General Treasury.
So thank you, Gerald, for that question. So my role, and I'll marry the two because I have the benefit of having to do two professional roles, one as a volunteer, but also one from a career perspective. And as you can imagine, part of the balance is between the two is how do you marry the two such that they don't get in each other's way, but they can complement each other. And so in one case, I am the Chief Wealth and Investment Officer for Vintage Wealth Management Group, which is a private wealth management firm in Charlotte, which serves individuals and institutions alike and providing financial planning for high net worth individuals and their families. And what it does is that along with the 17-year career that I had actually working for corporate America, with Bank of America, for an example, it allowed me to be the consummate general treasurer for Alpha Phi Alpha because it is strictly about managing the institutional wealth, overseeing the management of our investment portfolios, but also safeguarding the fraternity's assets. But one of the things that is changing is that when you are balancing how do you see and manage institutional wealth versus those of individuals, particularly for Alpha Phi Alpha, it is about solidifying and helping to increase the health and wellness of our members, as well as overseeing our financial wellness for the organization. Because one of the things that I constantly drive home is that there is absolutely no way for Alpha Phi Alpha to be successful without its members being successful as well. So we think about their abilities, our members' ability to be able to themselves have homes, themselves have businesses that are thriving well, themselves to be able to get access to quality education for themselves and their families. And so all of what Brother Lamb talks about is specific to each individual member of the community that our fraternity members actually live in, and the wholeness that they can realize in their own personal lives will tend to spread over in the fraternity's life as well, because it gives you the freedom, or gives us the freedom to be able to volunteer without limits. We can bring what we have learned and what we have attained outside of the organization and bring that into the house. And so as a general treasurer, I'm always pulling for that corporate experience. Many of what I can resonate with what Brother Lamb just mentioned very well in terms of what it actually means to manage. What is that level of sensitivity in equity inclusion lens that you actually should have when you are managing a corporate organization, and how can that translate over to that same skill set that you use to even be able to manage within the organization? Not even just from a professional perspective, but from the perspective of the voice that we actually use to empower our younger members who are coming in at a college level. You know, what is the information that we give to them that empowers them to be able to go out and to be well groomed, to be able to get a scholarship from JPMorgan, and to also to be not only just a scholarship or not only just an internship, but to be gainfully employed, regardless of whether or not they are business or accounting or accounting or business administration major or marketing or economics, but even transitioning over into other majors that they would not necessarily think that could be a good fit for talent for a JPMorgan, like computer science. And so I have to applaud JPMorgan for being for offering the partnership or accepting the invitation for partnership and digging down into the root causes of how we got here, but then how do we start to girt our ways out of it through long-term partnership as well. So my objective is to leverage my professional and personal relationships that I've gained again outside the organization, and to build up our institution with Alpha. Because what I see is that there's several similarities between the two organizations, right? JP Morgan's for profit, Alpha Phi Alpha not for profit, but both have the best of what each other needs in terms of talented members, some of which actually works for the organization or actually work for JP Morgan already. How do you build up on that to make sure that the best continuously comes out, and such that those of us who already have the common relationship, it doesn't get confused, but it also is something that we can build upon to really thrive and to build a relationship. So I'm excited about the dating. I use that concept very often. I'm excited about the organizations being able to date and to learn more about how do we appeal to the best of each other, and I'm glad to be on the forefront of that.
Thank you so much, Brother Fleming, and we're happy to have you as a fraternity, as a brotherhood, and I even think as a thought leader within your particular space, and also within just civil service space as well. And I kind of want to stay right there when we're talking about that diversity lens and really look at incorporate some products that help shape our community. And Brother Lamb, I see you biting at the bit to get back in here. So can you dive in and kind of tell us a little bit more about how we can incorporate that diversity lens and how we develop our services, our programs, serve our clients and communities as well?
Absolutely, Brother Johnson. Listen, I'll give you a couple of examples. I want you to think about this. There are billions of dollars in venture capital, right? Private capital that go into the marketplace each year. In many cases, the Black community sees about 1% or less of that. There are, tremendous opportunities with, large Fortune 500 companies that are spending billions of dollars on their supply chain. In many cases, Black companies are seeing less than 1% of that spend. And so if you look at the opportunity, I call it the size of the prize. The data really informs where the opportunity is. So now, how do you course correct? So let's talk about emerging capital, venture capital. When we design products in the asset management space, one of the things that we're doing, and we've announced some of this, but we're going to announce even more. We spent some time with a couple of Black asset managers and designed a strategy where we're going to set aside almost $200 million in partnership with Ariel Investments, which, by the way, is one of the largest, if not the largest, Black asset manager in the country, to invest in supply chain companies that can effectively face off with Fortune 500s to participate in all of the spending in key categories that historically we have not had access to. For whatever reason, our businesses may not have been big enough. There may have been structural barriers. We couldn't bond high enough. you name it, cybersecurity. There's all of these things that get in the way of us participating in the supply chain where many Black companies deserve a chance to compete. So we're going to work with asset managers to put capital to work to acquire and invest in these businesses that ultimately can be Black owned and then face off in the supply chain. It's a really unique and innovative way to create more Fortune 500 companies that are Black owned. Another idea is think about venture capital and emerging fund managers. These managers that are very bright, many of which have graduated from HBCUs or have gone to fantastic, predominantly white institutions around the country, and they've gained the experience to be out in the marketplace, but they need some help. They need someone to help them build capacity so that they ultimately in their fund can go invest in small businesses. Maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's technology, maybe it's logistics and manufacturing. Many of them have particular niches that they can invest in, but what they need is capacity. So what can we do around product development and asset management that we haven't historically done before? Maybe taking capital off our own balance sheet instead of just waiting on client capital to make these investments. Another example I'll share around designing products and services is one of the things you'll find with Black banks. Let's talk financial institutions. Historically, we had many more. We're down to approximately 20 Black banks across the United States. For all the wrong reasons, we've been losing these very important institutions that service, in many cases, the Black community. They need a couple of things. One, they need capital, because for every dollar of capital, there's somewhere between an 8 and 10 multiplier of capital they can then ultimately lend to small businesses and consumers in and around their footprint. So there's a multiplier effect on why we're going to put approximately $100 million into Black banks around the country on their balance sheet that gives them capacity to lend. But what if we can design products that they don't have historically? Most Black banks particularly do not have capacity or the technology to participate in asset management. So what if we designed a money market product that literally would allow the Fortune 500 companies to put excess cash to work in that money market fund, but the fund was in support of Black banks? So the fund's fees would ultimately go to these Black institutions that they could redeploy for marketing, to hire talent, to go out and really brand themselves and build up a reputation of being an asset manager, something they historically haven't had the ability to do. These are just a few examples of where, if we're innovative, if we're thoughtful and intentional, and we're really solving the job to be done, right? The problem that exists that can ultimately be a catalyst for financial institutions, for Black businesses and Black consumers, or if we designed a mortgage product that allowed us to go into areas where we know we are the majority minority in that marketplace, and we put people on the ground and we put products in place that allow people to increase their home ownership rates. These are the types of things that kind of bend the curve around making sure that the very communities, particularly the Black community that has been left behind, has an equitable opportunity to compete.
Awesome, Brother Lane. Thank you, sir. Brother Fleming, would you like to comment as well?
Yes, I'd love to. And this is where, when I made the comment earlier about like-minded, not just individuals, but also like-minded institutions, without even knowing about the investment that JPMorgan is expecting to make in support of Black banks. As you know, Gerald, we have just announced as an organization that we will be investing in launching our Black Depository program that will invest in deposits for Black banks across the country. We're starting with 2 per region within the fraternity. And so that is, I think, a testament of how we see the world, though we may launch different initiatives that will drive our own imprint and in terms of strategic ways of investing in our communities. I think the overall effect is to be close enough to each other to learn about what are the different ways that you can really channel resources there. Brother Lamb touched on something in terms of something that we've always known, in that the reality is that Black banks these days just do not have the investment infrastructure to be able to mass and to be able to scale to the size that most majority firms will have. So we have to find a way to invest in those meaningful ways, to continue to invest in ways that we know every financial institution, bank primarily needs. And that's the positives. And the more that you can build up on that, the greater the investment that it can actually make. And so I'm glad to know that there are certain things that are magnetic and energetic that's kind of catching in the air around these kinds of partnerships, because I think we're looking through a lens that allows us to be able to support our communities in very different way. The other thing I want to add to that is there is an enormous amount of discussion around infrastructure, and if you're listening to a lot of the congressional terms, a lot of the political terms around what infrastructure looks like, and what does it look like within certain communities. Essentially, what we're talking about is how do we describe the ecosystem? How do we describe the environments that vulnerable communities actually need to live off of? And what does that system looks like in terms of those systems that helps with indicators like upward mobility? So we're talking specifically about how do you invest in ways, in some ways that's financial, in some ways they're non-financial, right? But how do you invest in education, and what does that really look like? What are the age and how deep do you go, and what's the earlier age to start investing into? What does that look like? How do you secure Black-owned businesses, and what does that look like? Is that a form of access to be able to provide capital for operations, or is that the ability to be able to attract the best talent for a minority business? Well, what does it also look like in terms of those communities that don't have access to the internet? And so all of those are things that in some respects can be very overwhelming. But each organization will find a way to make the investments in the right place. Some may be by way of volunteering. Some might be by the way of leadership and coaching, mentorship, and others may be financial in nature. But I think where the opportunities are is in partnership. And Brother Lamb, we talked about that earlier. In partnership, I think you begin to see how you can best join. One organization can join the other organization at its work. And how do you do that in a way to where you can invest in some meaningful way, but you can also be a supplier for each other. In one specific way, I'd like to add to that, I just so happen to believe that Alpha Phi Alpha is one of the top resources for providing young African American men out in the workforce for professionals. And you can pick whether or not that is the arts, or whether or not that's the sciences, or whether or not that's technology. I just believe that is what's in our ground. And so if we know that, I would think that an organization, and they are, like JPMorgan, would want to be at the table much sooner, because we know that is a direct pipeline of talent that has already been proven, because JPMorgan is an institution that actually have alphas that's already a part of their workforce, because they get a chance to experience the quality of what our organization generates. And so finding those things that work to elevate those things continuously, and making sure that we continue to generate those kinds of resources that really helps to build the best of each other. And so I wanted to say that, but I say that in the spirit of looking for the opportunities, even as there are things that will come in a very unexpected way that can change the whole dynamic, like COVID, right? And even in that, though, we have to be extremely careful not to give COVID that much credit for ruining things, right? Because Alpha Phi Alpha by design has been around since 1906, and so we can think of many of disasters that has triggered a lot of things, but we're still here. And so I would appeal, that is what I'm most excited about, that can be a great return for the investment, those that we can identify and those that we've yet to determine as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brother Fleming, as well as Brother Lamb. I'm loving this conversation. I'm taking notes. trying to figure out here. And I think a common phrase that's used when we talk about the financial wellness of our community is the racial wealth gap, right? And we really talk about that. But I really feel like this conversation is really diving deeper into what that gap really looks like. And it seems like there's a lot more than just the wealth, but there's a lot of dynamics to it. And Brother Lamb, I want to come to you with this question because JPMorgan Chase has the Path Forward initiative as well, which is also addressing some of these issues. And could you tell us a little bit more about the steps that JPMorgan Chase is taking to kind of, I guess, narrow that racial wealth gap, as well as maybe give us a little inclination about the Path Forward initiative?
Sure. So I'll tell you a little bit. We talked earlier about our $30 billion racial equity commitment. This is a commitment that was put together through the thought leadership of both internal and external partners. We work with a number of human rights, civil rights, consumer advocacy groups to really challenge us on what could we do more. The $30 billion is incremental to our current run rates at JPMorgan Chase, and in many ways, it's the largest commitment of its kind in the United States. It includes key components of what we believe are going to drive outcomes to close the racial wealth gap, some of the gaps that are related to access to capital, home ownership rates, right? As you think about the things that we're doing around bolstering up neighborhood revitalization. Of the 30 billion, about 26 billion of it is really targeted at home ownership and affordable housing. Another 2.7 to 2.8 billion is structured specifically to try to enhance access to capital for small businesses and the money that we spend that can go to small businesses in the local markets. The rest of it is tailored to building out our facilities and branches and markets that have been underserved and underbanked, hiring talent, which I'll come back to, which is very important in terms of creating pathways for careers. And then, of course, philanthropy. These are the grants that ultimately can help amplify the work of the businesses in the local markets. Let me give you a couple of examples to crystallize the importance of this. First, let's talk about talent, because I believe that's really important. We know that in many ways, our HBCUs, for some time now, have helped galvanize the rich tradition of our Black community around the United States. In some ways, quite frankly, they have helped continue to grow all of the Divine Nine as they produce a tremendous amount of talent each and every year. But we also have another responsibility with HBCUs that's a little different than predominantly white institutions that also produce great talent. My mother and father went to an HBCU. They graduated from Stillman College there in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And my father ended up going to Dillard University as well. And he ended up setting the stage for me by becoming an alpha, setting the stage for me to understand the importance and the relevance and the impact of being a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And I'll never forget the first words when we were on campus at Stillman and we stood by the shield and we really understood, and I began to learn the impact and the role that we play for Black men around the country. But if you go back and you think about HBCUs, not only is it about talent on why we need to invest in them, which is all part of our racial equity commitment, the infrastructure, the buildings, the housing, the capacity that they have in their endowments, all are far lower than predominantly white institutions. Both are producing great talent, but one has been left behind in terms of investment to build them a foundation for the future. So as part of our path forward, we are looking intentionally at lifting up a number of HBCUs because we know long-term we've got to make sure they're here for another 100 years. Also important, something I'll throw out is we talked about products and services earlier. What if I told you that there are almost 6 million affordable housing units in the United States, but they are depleting because of gentrification and other reasons at about 100,000 units per year? That's right, we're going backwards in terms of creating opportunities for affordable housing, even if it's rental. Okay, now fast forward and you say, okay, what are we going to do in our racial equity commitment to curtail that? How can we go create a product that ultimately incentivizes developers that are borrowing money to finance these units to keep their prices at rates that people can afford? How do we create a product at JPMorgan Chase to do that? That's all about the thinking that we're doing, and we put that in place at the beginning of the year. And we've already put $1 billion of work, $1 billion to work with developers all over the country to incentivize them to not raise rates and gentrify communities, which we know in many cases are predominantly Black. The last thing I'll leave you with as you think about the path forward and ultimately our racial equity commitment is jobs. If you go to the junior, the emerging talent in universities and college, or even professionals that are at work, they're all looking for opportunities for career advancement and mobility. So how do we go and create lifelong learning that is all about the future of work? We know because of automation, offshoring, and other reasons and consolidations that you're seeing jobs that are disappearing at the lower levels in companies where many Black men and women are working today. So the future of work is all about giving them skills that allow them to go compete for jobs of the future. So we create lifelong learning curriculum that specifically positions them to apply and get jobs inside and outside our firm so that they can have the right quality of life. I would tell you at the end of the day, a lot of this creative things that we're doing, I'd love to see so many other companies do it. This is a space where competition is a good thing. It lifts all boats, and we're going to do our part to try to compete and participate to lift up what I believe are very important key elements of the Black community.
Thank you so much, Brother Lamb. Brother Fleming, did you want to comment on that as well?
You know, I did. As Brother Lamb was talking, I was reminding of a book that I bought some time ago and had the chance to speak with the author, and ultimately ended up becoming really good friends. It's a brother, an Alpha brother by the name of Sean Rochester. You all may be aware of him, who wrote the book, The Black Tax. And in that, he talks about everyone having their PhD, not the academic degree, but PhD, which stands for Purchase, Hire, Deposit. And it specifically challenges us to purchase Black, hire Blacks, deposit in Black institutions, or in some way patronize Black businesses as well. And you think about that concept and how you can apply that almost across any sector, whether or not it's if you are an individual yourself having to live up to that concept, or whether or not you are a person like Brother Lamb who is in power, or even myself, or who has the power to hire, or who has the power to purchase, or in some way deposit some type of resource into our communities. That is the lens, I think, that we're ultimately talking about. And though we may again be angled in it from different ways, we're talking about figuring out how do we continue to impart those investments, and what does that really look like in a world that's really kind of forever changing. So then I kind of go back to really how do we see the world. I listened to Brother Lamb's story about the experience that he had coming up with and his introduction to the fraternity, and as we all know, Alpha builds leaders, right? So it's all of that we bring forward, that every entity in every area that we touch, we have that same concept in mind to apply a lens of leadership and philanthropy, and those things that are non-tangible, to apply that in some sort of way to actually build up our communities. I think about going into the bank. I grew up in Mississippi. I think about going into this country town bank in what we call a town with my grandfather, and seeing this African American man who I was shocked at age 6 to see a Black man working in the bank. And without even realizing it, years later, that is what ended up kind of that stroked my interest to go into finance and becoming interested in knowing about consumerism and commercial and real estate, and knowing about finances and investments, and then building a career, and then also being the catalyst to also being a mentor of others that are in the industry. And what that has, in a sense, evolved in has been kind of a dynamic of being available to others who are wanting to come into the industry, right? And wanting to come into the industry, but also seeing the example and the demonstration of what it means to be a responsible, selfless individual who's a professional, but who's also allowing resources to flow through them back out to the community. And that could look very differently. It doesn't have to necessarily mean in terms of dollars, but it could just mean in terms of time and mentoring and providing access to referrals for careers. And a very specific example, Brother Lamb, you would appreciate this. I think about Cedric Blocker, for an example, who at one point was not even in Alpha, right? And him being in the city of Charlotte, and we grabbing him up, and now he's a member. Now he works for your organization, but he has recruited young African American men directly out of college from across the country, not just at traditionally white institutions, but also at HBCUs as well, primarily. So you can see how the ecosystem is set up to where when you have a lens of wanting to be in support of your community, there is a way that may look differently for all of us. And I know this is kind of very philosophical, but there's a way to pull in our professionalism and make it work for the uplifting of the community. What that means, though, is that you have to recognize your differences in how your organizations are structured. As an example, Alpha Phi Alpha is a 501c7 organization. We're not structured to be for profit. We are a nonprofit, but we are a profitable organization. What we have here is one of service, right? We have housed leaders, whether or not it's Thurgood Marshall or Martin Luther King, we have housed those leaders in-house. That is what we exist with. But we have to partner, and we have to find those organizations who have some of the fiber that we believe in that helps us along the way so that we can become better as well. Because we need mortgages. We want to start businesses. We need merchant services. We also need effective quality ways of having deposits. We need bill pay. You can be as product specific as you like, but all of those are things that we actually not only need, but we deserve as well. And so this is where we start to pull together. Again, I keep going back to that, Brother Johnson, the best of actually what we have. How do we make it work to where we can build upon that continuously?
Thank you so much there, Brother Fleming. And I'm going to put you on the spot, Brother Fleming. I think you gave us a great transition. You mentioned partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And we are here with JPMorgan Chase and Brother Lamb, and you mentioned Brother Cedric Blocker, who was on our webinar on Tuesday, who delivered an exquisite discussion and gems for our brothers and how they can really get involved with JPMorgan Chase.
He learned that from me, Brother Johnson. He learned
There it is, everybody. You heard it here first. So do you mind maybe diving in a little bit and kind of talking about how our partnership is kind of developing, how we're looking to take our partnership with JPMorgan Chase to the next level?
So let me tell you where it all started, and I think it's important to recognize this. And I can tell you that when I took the torch as General Treasurer in July of 2017, I wasn't absolutely sure that any of our financial advisors knew how important we were, knew who we were. And when I say important, I don't mean that in a boastful way. I meant how critical it was that Alpha Phi Alpha remain strong, because we needed to do the work for our communities. And I wasn't convinced of that because I didn't necessarily see the consistency in partnership. What I saw and what I witnessed at the time were strong financial institutions who were perhaps being good vendors for us and they were doing good jobs for us, but I wasn't sure if they actually knew who we were. And my challenge to our financial advisor at that time was, I said, I want you to date us. Let's get to know each other on a different level. The expectation is that the job that you will do for us will be quality. And if that's the case, you will remain around and we will remain your client. But if we went farther than that, let's look at what it is that we do as an organization. Do you know that we're 501c7? Do you know how we make our revenue? Do you know why it's important that we sustain another 114 years? And are you aware of who some of our members are? Are you even aware that there may be some of our members who even works for your organization? And I got a lot of no's back. I'm not sure. I don't think it was ever introduced that way. So my challenge at that time was we've got to be better about knowing who we do business with, and that goes both ways, right? That meant that we need to do a better job of introducing ourselves and what our expectations were, not just from the perspective of the job that we actually need for you to do, but the work that our community needs. We're required that we have only quality partners with us who actually understands what we're about, but then they can also be at the table with us because we're going to need them to help us to be able to sustain. And out of that, I must say that this organization really stepped up, and we started that partnership and that conversation today. And lo and behold, Brother Lamb comes out of nowhere, and his name shows up, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't know. Did you know that one of your brothers, who's one of our top quality brothers who works for organizations, he's an alpha?" And I said, "I'll bet you, if you just ask the question, you will find that there are many of us who works for your organizations that are adding to your bottom line, but they're also quality human capital. That then it would make sense." Why our partnership should exist. And so that is the charge that we're building upon. And I'm looking forward to where it's going to go on from here.
Thank
Brother
you so much,
Johnson,
Brother Fleming.
let me just build on that. I mean, at the end of the day, a firm our size around the world, 60, 70 countries, each and every day, we see a lot and we hear a lot, and there's lots of different opportunities to engage with organizations. I got to tell you, there's no doubt that I have a very conscious bias around my beliefs and support of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. But if you laid Alpha and its mission and its purpose and the impact that it has, there is natural alignment to the things that we want to do at JPMorgan Chase. So as we think about partnerships and organizations that we ultimately want to think about into the future, Alpha stood out. And so, at the end of the day, one of the things that we principally have to do is as we look at our partners and firms, we should all be very clear at the end of the day, what's the impact and is it measurable? And can we point to sustainable change? So as we think about the young men that we want to uplift and position them to move forward, I think that's a shared goal that we would have. And I think there's plenty of opportunity. And frankly, plenty of room for other companies to engage and participate in this. And so I hope if we don't do anything else, we inspire other organizations to join in, right, to amplify the work of Alpha Phi Alpha and reach down and help these young brothers and sisters move forward. So it's really an important effort that we partner together. And I think we can be a model for the future. And we don't have to have it all figured out today. But I definitely hope you can see and feel that there's a path forward for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brother Lamb. And I'm excited about the partnership that we're developing. I'm sure those that are listening are also very excited about that. The brothers have been seeing a lot of JPMorgan Chase being advertised through our virtual space, our general convention this year. We're excited that they'll be serving as one of our top tier partners and official title sponsors as well. And I see we're coming close to the 5 o'clock hour here, and I definitely wanted to allow the audience to ask any Q&A questions that they may have for our speakers there. But as I did Brother Fleming, Brother Lamb, I had to put you on the spot as well, right? Because I love the gems that you've been providing us today. And the one question I want to hear about I want to see if you can put on both hats, right? Because you're also a brother of Alpha, but also serving JPMorgan Chase, and we're looking to build that partnership. What do you think would be the number one way that we can make a substantial difference collectively?
Yeah, no, it's all about prioritization. There are so many things we can go after and tackle. Here's where I think we have a big opportunity. Is we should really be thinking about how do we create pathways for the next generation? It's natural to want immediate gains. It's human nature to say, hey, what are we going to do next quarter? What are we going to do next year? Fact of the matter is we're a 114-year-old organization tracking to 115, right? We've been on this for the long haul. We've got to keep a longer term mindset. I think one of the things we should be doing is how are we making sure that young brothers are making decisions, not just financial decisions, but career decisions, and they're going into careers that are careers for the future. So we should be very intentional in providing insights around that. And keep in mind, not everything requires a 4-year degree. You're going to hear about a lot of companies that are moving kind of a step back from requiring 4-year degrees, because you can go into technology and make 6 figures and not have a 4-year degree if you've got the right certifications and you've been focused on the right opportunities. I personally think if we could pick just 1 or 2 things, maybe lean in at the HBCUs together, right? And make sure that we're creating pathways for Black men to move into careers where they can have success, very significant success with regards to wealth creation, long-term careers, and a responsibility to then give back, right? So they see the model of Alpha Phi Alpha and realize that when they're watching our fellowship, we're principally lifting each other up, onward and upward, towards the light. I mean, that is principally the momentum and the energy that we have, and it shows up in the way that we behave. So if we picked something, it's hard to pick one. I would encourage us to think about the next generation. And if we do that right, we won't go backwards. If we do that right, I think we'll be really proud of the legacy that we leave, which is all part of being a man of Alpha. And I think if we do that right, we will ultimately build something for scale.
Thank you so much, Brother Lamb. And again, thank you so much, Brother Fleming. I wanted to provide a moment for our audience to potentially ask any questions. Brother Lamb, I echo your sentiments as far as how we could potentially really look at the next generation. And we here at the General Office, we often talk about our organization and the multi-generalizations that we have within our organization, as far as brothers that are in college, as well as brothers that are at the alumni level doing great things. So we're excited to be working with JPMorgan Chase and to be building out something that really is going to not only impact our now, but also impact on our future as well. And as I see, we're closing in on that 5 o'clock time, and I do not see any further questions within the comments here. But I do see that brothers are thoroughly enjoying the conversation. They love how we're dialogue. So it's not like we may have to have another one of these and maybe continue this conversation another time. But I did want to leave you both with some closing comments before we leave today. Brother Fleming, would you like to leave with some closing comments?
Sure, yes. Again, I want to thank JPMorgan, the staff, certainly Karan, who's not on, my Brother Lamb for certainly for being a part of the discussion, the beginning of the discussion that I think will go to some exciting places of problem solving. Just effectively solving problems and addressing issues as they are. We're continuously learning. I think one of the mistakes that sometimes that we make, a lot of organizations just by accountability do a lot of strategic planning, do a lot of focus grouping, and do a lot of research. And I think that those things are true. But a lot of times we have to, I believe, really stop and pause and to meet organizations where they are and figure out what is a good common ground to actually start up on. I am just at the heart. I just like appealing to the human part, human side of people, and paying close attention to that, because sometimes we can get hung up in a lot of the statistics until we forget what that really looks like in terms of those things you actually have to address right in front of you. My challenge to the partnership, not necessarily to JPMorgan or even to Alpha, but to the partnership is always continue to seek the opportunity to learn and to be open to things that we may be resistant against, but it may be the right thing to do. But also listen to our members and to our constituents as well, and to make sure that we're always in place to be able to give them value of their membership. And that is extremely important. We know that those are the things that keeps our members coming back. It helps with retention. It helps to keep members in the house. And I see when we're adding value and when members are graduating from college, and you're also Alpha is the canal that gives them options like JPMorgan to be gainfully employed, such that they can either continue to start their career or they can continue on to graduate school. That is where the meat of our brotherhood and our partnership, I think, can really be executed to the next level. So I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to the partnership, and I hope that the context of our discussion really helps our members to understand what true partnership can look like throughout our communities, and we're looking forward to the next step.
Thank you so much, Brother Fleming. And I love leaving our partners with their last words as well. And Brother Lamb, we have someone would like to access to your. I guess how can they get access to you? Would you like to provide our brothers able to reach out to you? I know you're a high profile brother with a lot happening. Are we able to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'll make sure Karan connects with everybody and provide the pathway to get so we can all get connected the right way. Listen, my closing comments are very simple. I'm grateful to have a chance to be here with the brothers. I'm very excited about the future together. I think we all have a responsibility and we can all play a role in what our path forward is. I would ask all of the brothers and challenge them to, what's your role, right? Well, how do you want to be remembered? When it's all said and done, when the day is done, what will they say about us? And that's a true testament to the legacy that we leave. And we've got a chance to leave our fingerprints on our legacy right now. And that's really the push and the motivation that I hope gets all of us inspired about the difference we make. And so thank you for the opportunity to be here, Brother Johnson and Brother Fleming. And I would like to close with just saying A5.
Absolutely, brothers. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. And again, hope everyone's enjoying our 96th General Convention. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Be blessed.